Hey everyone, welcome back to the Redlands Rundown, your official podcast of Redlands Community College, where we're committed to helping our students find success in college, in their career, and with everything in between. Today, we are turning the mic over to somebody that you guys have met before, our co-host, and also our career readiness specialist, Sydney. I'm happy and really excited about today's episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It'll be fun to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, so we'll focus today on the services that you provide for our students, what they can come to you for, and why it's important to seek out the support that you give our students and how that can really benefit them down the future. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation a little bit more. Okay, so I want to start with your story and what inspired you to take this role, and tell them exactly what your role is, please.
Yeah, so I'm the career readiness specialist. I have a pretty unique position because I am split between two different campuses. So I work here and I also work at USAO and Chickasha. My main role is essentially like career services. So anything to help with in getting you career ready. So if that's resumes, if that's interview prep, if it's getting you an internship, a job shadowing, making those connections in and outside of the college, and just getting students to the next step of getting ready for what's coming after we leave here. As far as my story, I don't know. I think it's funny looking back. It's not like I, as a child, was like, oh, I'm going to be a career coach.
Right.
That wasn't necessarily the goal, but I think sometimes stars align in a way. I was working at Redlands as a student advisor, and so I was doing concurrent enrollment and traditional enrollment, and this job opportunity opened up. And at the time, we had a consultant over here from USAO helping us out, and he told me, hey, this is opening up, and you told me, this is opening up. I think I'm going to be over it. And you and I are such good friends, and we work pretty good together. And so the opportunity just kind of arose. And I not only graduated from here with my associates, I graduated from USAO with my bachelor's. And the chance to go back there and help students in a way that I felt like I could have benefited from help was really important to me. And I think that's what really drove the decision, was that I was giving back to students in one way when I was advising here, but when I was in college, I so desperately needed someone to help me with these things. I needed someone to sit me down and say, like, it's okay that you don't know. Here's what we're going to do to find out.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. Of course, I had my parents, and I had so many supportive people, but I didn't have a dedicated person that they were getting paid to do this job, essentially. And so when I read the description, I just thought, this is what I've been looking for. Like, this is how I want to give back to students and how I want to help them. So I don't know. My dad will always talk about, I wanted to be an insurance adjuster since I was 8 years old. I didn't have that experience, but I think I have ended up somewhere that I'm really happy with.
Yeah, and I think that's a good testament and lesson for our students. When an opportunity arises, always consider what you have, because, that wasn't necessarily on your radar,
right.
But when the opportunity arose, even though it wasn't something that you were actively seeking, to take advantage of that opportunity, and you've been a fantastic fit for the position.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think that's great. So I want you to talk a little bit about what's one thing that typically students don't know about, career services and what you offer to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think first they don't know that we have it here.
Right.
And it is a new role, and so that's understandable. We did always have a version of career services, but it was embedded into the admissions office. And so it was a job on top of a job. And now this is a dedicated position, and I am here to help solely with that. And so I think that's the first thing I want students to know, is that this resource is available to you. But the other thing I want them to know is it doesn't have to be like you have to come in with a perfect resume and that's the only time you can come see me. We can make a resume together, or maybe you want to come in and you want to do career aptitude testing, or maybe you want to come in and you just want to talk about options for you, or maybe I want to go job shadow here, but I don't know the connection to make. That's what I do. Like, that's a huge part of my job, is that outreach. And so I think what I really want them to know is that I am here to help, and there's never too small of a question.
Yeah.
There's never something that I'm going to be like, well, you should already know that, because you shouldn't. And even if you should for some reason, it doesn't matter. You haven't done it before. And I think that's what I always hope students feel when they walk in, is that this is such a safe place for you to come ask me anything related to career, and I will help you figure it out.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned aptitude testing. I think students coming in to take value in aptitude testing is so valuable. I did that this week for one of my assignments for my coursework right now, and learned so much about myself, and it's so interesting. And so I think that specific thing that you offer in helping guide students through will give them a lot of insight to themselves and help them navigate some of those tough decisions. Like, I don't know what I want to do. Right. Well, let's look at what you care about. What are your values? What are you good at? What are your aptitudes? Yeah. So that was one thing that I was going to ask, if that's something that you help our students with, because I think that's awesome.
Oh, it's so fun. And I think it's so interesting because I've taken them. Like when I started doing this job, I was doing all the testing that I was asking students to do, because I won't ever ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And so I was taking the career aptitude test. I was taking the Enneagram. I was taking the Myers-Briggs. And I was learning so much about myself in those moments. And I think students get discouraged because it's like, okay, you should be a camp counselor. Because that was one of the ones that I got. And I was like, they don't know this about me. I'd be a terrible camp counselor. But that's not the point of it. It's not like, okay, here's the jobs. It's the point of it's aligning your values, because it knows that I'm human-centric. It knows that I can communicate. It's figuring those things out. And then it's giving you options that maybe you haven't considered. And maybe those are options that you're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But that's a learning experience too.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Okay, so I want to transition now a little bit to talking about why career readiness matters, why taking advantage of the things that you offer our students now in junior college is important, because a lot of our students are planning to transfer on and go on for their bachelor's, but there's never too early. So I want you to talk a little bit about the term career readiness first. We hear that a lot. Talk to us about how you would define that.
I mean, to me, career readiness is just being able to walk in a room and do a job interview well. It's being able to have a great resume. Career readiness isn't necessarily you knowing exactly the job that you're going to do and how to do that job. It's being adaptable. It's being able to communicate. It's being able to learn how to do these different jobs. And that's what, when I talk with employees all across the state, all that they say all the time is, like, I can teach them how to do this job. I can't teach them how to communicate. Right. I can't teach them how to be cooperative. I can't teach them how to work on a team, but I can train them to do accounting. I can train them to figure out this computer, but give me those skills. And so to me, career readiness is really honing in on those durable skills and teaching these students, okay, here's how you present yourself when you walk into a room. You're constantly, like, once the interview starts, you've been watched the whole time. The interview started when you walked in the door. So in a way, it is teaching that intrinsic value of, like, okay, I'm prepared to do this and I can impress somebody. And I can go from there on what I need to know.
Yeah. And a lot of times the interview starts when you submit your cover letter and your resume. That's their first impression of you. So, I think what you mentioned on employers saying we can teach these specific skills. We need people that can come in, that can communicate, that are motivated, that are open-minded, and, you helping with the, like you said, durable skills. I love that. I refer to those sometimes as essential skills. And a lot of people call them soft skills, but I think there's so much more than just soft skills. I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot, but it's so important.
Oh, I know. And I think back to the jobs that I've had, and they have been all over the spectrum of all the different things that I've done. But what has tied them together and what has helped me succeed has not been that I knew on-job training when I stepped in the door. It's that I can communicate and I'm competent enough to figure out what you need from me, and I'll adapt to whatever it is.
Right.
And I think that's the case for a lot of professionals, is it's not that you showed up to the job knowing exactly what it was going to be. It's that you said, I don't know what this is, but I'm ready enough to figure this out.
Right, exactly. Okay, so now I want you to talk to our listeners and our students about why it's important to start thinking about, their career before, they're graduating.
Yeah. There's this, it's like a joke amongst all of us that work in career services, is that students show up 3 days before graduation and they're like, oh yeah, I need my resume. Which is fine. You can absolutely do that. However, it's so much easier on you if you start, even as a freshman. There's no time that's too early to start. I think Oklahoma, and I know this for sure, it is such a workforce state. We are economically dependent on a lot of our jobs and everything like that. And every state is, but we really push it for a reason. And we're seeing that from the state regents, that we need students who are ready to be employed. And so I think what I always think about when I tell students, like, why is this important, is that they're always thinking, okay, well, I've submitted so many applications and so many resumes and no one's gotten back to me. And I always tell them, okay, but think if you were the employer and you're getting 7,000 resumes and 7,000 applications and you can't find one that you're impressed by.
Right.
And so you being able to wow them from the second that you do that, that's why it matters to start early, because you never know what opportunity is going to present itself. Like you said, that's a huge part of it. But if that opportunity presents itself and you've already been doing this work, you don't have to wait. You don't have to miss out on a chance. And so that's why I always encourage start it early, because you can only get better from here.
Right, exactly. And I think speaking from my experiences, you learn a lot about what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
I had an internship one summer, and it was a job I thought I wanted to do after I graduated. I was really excited. And, I learned a lot from this role, but for the good, but I also discovered this is not something that I want to do after graduation. I enjoyed the experience and I learned a lot, but, that gave me kind of some clarity on, okay, this is not what I want to do. And there's so much value in that.
Some of my best and biggest learning experiences have been from what others might consider like failing in a sense. I know Professor Schottenkirk talked about it at our service learning thing, where I did do service learning when I was in school here, and I tutored at the 3rd grade here in El Reno, and I loved it. I thought it was the best thing ever. I did not want to be a 3rd grade teacher after that. That was a learning experience for me. I had that same experience when I was doing speech pathology. I started doing on-site training and doing all these things, and I realized this is really wonderful and someone should do this, but it's not me.
Right.
And I think to a degree, I think we as people hold on so tightly to our beliefs, and we don't want to know that it's not supposed to work out. We don't want to find out, oh, I was wrong about this. But it's so much easier and better to find out as a sophomore, as a junior in college, than it is to find out your first year in that job. Because we don't want you to get this degree and then turn around and realize, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life.
Right.
We don't, and you don't have to start over from that point, but it can feel that way. And so if we can avoid that feeling for you, and so I love that you mentioned that the earlier we can start, the more we can learn, and we can say like, okay, I don't want to do this forever.
Right.
Let's pivot.
Yeah. So what are a few simple steps that students can take now to start moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think a career aptitude testing is one of the things I always recommend, because I think at this age, a lot of the time, especially in community college, we're still not sure.
Right.
And so I always recommend career aptitude testing. I recommend the Enneagram. I recommend Myers-Briggs, just because the Enneagram teaches you not just like your personality, but your motivations and your fears. And so that's a really helpful one and a very useful one.
And tell our listeners what aptitudes are, because I think
Yes.
not a lot of people know what values, aptitudes, what those different things are.
Yeah, so essentially it's just this giant test that you get to take, especially career related, where it'll say, do you enjoy building things with your hands, or different things like that. And it helps you align your values from your goals, essentially, and just teaches you these different things about yourself and separates it into. So every platform has different metrics that they score on. And that's one of the really cool things about it too. But yeah, the general idea behind it is that it's essentially just figuring out what aligns with you as you are as a person, and then also what you're hoping to do. And it just asks you these questions that you're able to kind of rank more than anything.
Right. And they can come to you in your office to complete those things.
Yes, they can.
Okay.
And I think that's what I would recommend first. And then the other thing I would recommend is building a resume. Starting with your resume, because I think we always think like, well, I don't have any experience, but that's not true. And I think we might get more into that probably later, but as long as you're keeping track of all these things, because you don't want to forget what you've accomplished and then not mention it on your resume later.
Right. Yeah, and that takes us into our next section, actually. I want to move into resumes 101.
Yeah.
That's kind of my next thing I want to focus on. And you mentioned how some students feel like, well, I don't have any experience. I don't have anything to put on there. It's all about how you package everything and present yourself. Because I had a student in a class the other day that was saying, well, I can't list, that I help my family with my family's business. And
why not?
Why not? Yeah. And it's like, hey, we can package things differently. Yeah. I gave the example one day because we've talked about this before, and this goes off of, I want students to know that, yes, it's important what you study, what you major in to be somewhat related, but like I have a master's in meat science
Yeah.
and I work in higher education.
Right.
So really, you have a lot of flexibility.
You do.
But if I was going to apply for a job in industry versus a job teaching in higher education, I would package those experiences very differently.
Right.
And it's not that I'm stretching the truth or being
Right.
dishonest. It's just about creating that perfect package for the employer to see you and highlighting the skills that are most relevant to that position. So that's what, and I'm not meaning to like take over.
no.
So I want you to talk about what makes a resume stand out. Or first, before we go into that, tell our listeners what, if they're not familiar, what a resume, what a cover letter is.
Yeah. So your resume is essentially just a list of your experiences, accomplishments, education, things like that. Your cover letter is more personal. It's going to be a statement as to why you're interested in this job and what your accomplishments are more packaged up. The thing that I tell students is everything is an experience. Because I have students that are like, well, I've never had a job. That's fine. You don't have to have had a job to have an experience on a resume. The class that you took that was relevant to this job, that's an experience. You being on a team, that's an experience. There's so many different things that this is qualified as an experience. And as you're starting out, most of the time what employers want to see is that you're responsible, that you're able to hold a job, that you have time management. And so maybe what you did was that you babysat your little sister for 7 years as you were growing up. That's an experience. Because you learned responsibility, you learned time management, you learned how to take care of someone else. And again, like you said, it goes back to packaging it and tailoring it. But yeah, essentially when we're looking at our resume, what we're wanting to put in there is the experiences that we've had, whether that is our job, a class that we took, an experience on a team, our education level. We want to highlight skills a lot of the time. And then your cover letter, it will change a little bit more. Again, it's also tailored to the job that you're applying for because you're going to want to highlight different skills depending on the job that you're looking at. But I always tell people, think of it like a personal statement almost, because it is trying to sell yourself essentially to the person that's reading it.
Right. Okay. And there's a couple different kinds of resumes, chronological, functional. Do you have a preference on which ones you like the most?
I typically always do reverse chronological. That's always my rule of thumb. And part of that is just that's how I was taught. But I do think it's very dependent on the field that you're going into. And that's something we practice a lot over at USAO, especially because an art major may need something different than an education major. A business major is definitely going to need something different than an education major. The other thing that I really focus on is that I like it to be one page.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it should, unless you're doing a CV and you're wanting to go into, you want to be a professor at a university and do research, then you can list those out, but keep it one page.
Yes. And so I think that's something that's always a little bit intimidating to students is that on one hand, you have students that are like, well, I don't have any experience. And on the other, you have these students that have so many experiences that how do you narrow it down? And that's a big part that I help with. And a lot of the time it's, okay, you choose your 3 to 5 that you felt were most important to you. And then I'll go through and I will help you edit it and make it sound even better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for those that are listening that are not familiar with the different types, reverse chronological is the most recent.
Yeah.
So if it was your education and you're a student at Redlands, you would put Redlands first. And then below that, you would put your high school and vice versa. So awesome. Okay. So what is a common mistake that you see students make whenever they're crafting their resumes or their cover letters, and how can they really work to fix that and avoid those?
Yeah, I think the biggest I see probably formatting. Formatting can be really tricky, but B, I would say just the length of it. And I was guilty of this 1000%. When I first did a resume, it was like 7 pages long because I was like, they need to know everything I've ever done in my whole life.
Yeah. You have every single award from high school from your freshman year up.
Yes. And so I think that more than anything is that's the mistake that I see a lot is figuring out how do we balance, yes, you did accomplish these things and that's wonderful. Let's make it digestible to the person that's going to read it. And how I would say you fix that is, A, come see me. I'm happy to help with that, but also be very specific with what you're putting on there and tailor it the way that we were talking about. So if you're applying for a job to McDonald's, for instance, what you're going to want to highlight is your customer service experiences. You're not going to want to highlight anything outside of that. And so it's really being particular about, okay, this is the job I want. This is what I need to highlight for it.
Yeah. And I think when you're crafting, like your experience section, one thing that I tried to do when I was graduating from college and applying for jobs is look at the job description and the requirements that they have and pull some action verbs
Absolutely.
from the description, lead and communicate and some of those different action verbs, and make sure that each of your bullets in your experience sections, usually, would you agree, start off with an action verb?
Yeah, I think start off with an action verb, and I think lead with that, like you said. And that's the other thing is people don't realize a lot of the time those who crafted the description are probably also reading that resume. And so those words are going to stick out to that person that's looking at it. The other thing is making sure that you're using the correct verbiage and like past tense versus present tense, because that's what I see a lot of the time too, is someone will have a job that they're currently doing and they're using past tense, and it's, no, you're currently doing this, so we're wanting to use present tense. We're wanting to make it clear that this is something you're currently doing, and vice versa. If it's something you did in the past, we want to make sure that it says we led, we did, this was a previous experience and not a current experience. But yeah, action words are huge because it catches the eye of the person that's reading it.
Right. And one thing that I want to elaborate on before we move on is we mentioned how resumes really should be one page. The second page, though, is that spot where you're putting references, correct? And do you have any tips for students that need references? How do they seek those out? Do they need to contact them beforehand? Touch on that real quickly.
Yes, contact your references beforehand. I will say if you tend to use the same references over and over, you will probably get to a point with them where they're like, you don't have to text me every time. I always use my old history professor, Professor Tabor, as a reference for anything. And I'd done it enough times that he was finally like, Sydney, use me whenever you want. You don't have to contact me to do it. But it is always great to ask them ahead of time so that they can be expecting a call or an email or whatever it is. My other tip with references is that it should not be a family member, obviously. That's really the only one rule. But find someone that can speak to your value of character. And then also if you want to have like a professor or something. And so I think a lot of the time we think, well, I don't have a reference outside of someone that's related to me. And that's probably not true a lot of the time. It might be your neighbor next door. It doesn't have to be anything like, well, the doctor of this so-and-so who taught me this class. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I know that one time I had a reference letter written and it was by one of my neighbors because I knew that he could speak to the testament of who I was. And that's what I wanted him to highlight in that instance. And so I think it's really taking just a look of, okay, who do I have around me? And who can speak to these different things that I want to highlight.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, I'm glad that we elaborated on cover letters, resumes, how to craft those. So I want to move on now. We've submitted our resume and our cover letters.
Yes.
We secured a job interview. So I want to talk about interviewing in that process. That can be very stressful and overwhelming.
Yeah.
What are your favorite tips that you would share with our listeners for staying calm and staying confident?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do with students is mock interviews. They'll email me or I will reach out to them knowing that they have this coming up, and I'll say, okay, what is the job that we're looking at? And they'll tell me the description of it, or they'll send me the job link, whatever it might be. And I go and I pull common questions within that industry. And we'll do a mock interview. And so obviously, are those going to be the exact questions that you were asked? Probably not, but you're practicing with someone that's not yourself. And that's the other thing that I do recommend, as weird as it feels, is looking in the mirror and practice making eye contact with yourself, practice how you're saying what you're saying, practice the way that you want to say these things and what you are actually saying. But then if you can get with your career coach, if you can come to me, we can do these things together. And that way you can also get feedback because it can be a lot if you're only talking to yourself in the mirror. Eventually, you think like, I'm doing really good. Or it starts being like, I don't know anymore. Like I've said these same things over and over again. The other thing I recommend is really honing in on questions like, tell me about yourself. That's going to be asked all the time. So get yourself a script that you know.
Yeah, put together your elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm. Put together your elevator pitch. You're going to use that over and over again. And it doesn't have to be different every time. It can be the same thing. And so that's one of the things that I recommend is those questions that you know are going to be asked. have an answer already ready. You don't have to fly off the cuff on everything.
Yeah, I think it's good to be prepared. And something that I would recommend to students is, in a lot of cases, you're going to get questions that ask for, give me an example of a time that you were on a team and had to work together to come up with a solution, or, a time where you disagreed with somebody. And so I think going into an interview with some examples of different situations that you've been in, how you contributed to the outcome. And again, like you said, looking up common questions for that industry or area that you're applying for, you'll get a feel of what those example scenarios and situations might be. So take some time in a few days to reflect on different experiences that you've had, different situations that you've been in, because in the moment, when somebody asks you that question, you're like, oh my goodness, I have no idea. But if you take the time to really reflect, I promise you'll have great examples that you can share.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot like studying, to be honest with you. It's just different because you're really trying to study yourself in a way. The other thing I recommend is have questions that you're going to ask them.
Yeah.
Always have questions that you're going to ask them. As much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them too. And that was kind of like a mindset shift I had to make was, do I want this job? Not just, yes, I'm interviewing for this job, but as I'm interviewing for this job, does it even align with what I'm wanting?
Right.
And that kind of helped take some of the pressure off of me, because I was able, obviously I wasn't grilling the interviewer or anything, but I was able to turn it around a little bit and make it like, yes, I know that I'm the one being interviewed, but also as you're talking to me, I'm figuring out if this is what I want.
Right.
And that gives you back a sense of control in a way. And so that's something that I always recommend, is making sure that you as the interviewee are also taking note of this and putting it back in your power.
Right, exactly. And I think the type of questions that you ask are important too. I actually was, when we were at Pratt & Whitney the other day, and they were talking about an interviewee that at the end of their interview, when they asked them, do you have any questions for us? The interviewee said, was it, can I work from home?
Yeah.
So be conscious of the questions that you ask, because if we are hosting an interview and somebody comes in and says, well, can I work from home? That gives us a feeling of, this person doesn't want to collaborate. They don't want to be in the team. So be mindful of the kind of questions that you're asking. Some of my favorites were, if I get this position, what can I do in the time before I start to be successful when I come onto the team? Or, from previous people in this position, what are some things that you're looking for to change? Or what are some of the first main priorities that you want this position to accomplish?
One of my favorites is always to ask, what's the metric system you're going to use to measure how I'm doing in the first 3 months of this job?
Yeah.
And that was something I asked in my last interview when I got this position. And it didn't stump Kelly, my boss now, but she was like, oh, that's a great question. Here's what we're going to do. And so I think if you can go in with 2 to 3 questions that are not, can I work from home? Because that guy at Pratt & Whitney said the second that guy said that.
Yeah, he was off the table.
Yeah. It wasn't even an option anymore. And so I think that's such a good point, is to be so conscientious of what you're saying, and how you're saying it.
Okay, so now that we talked about interviews, I want to talk more about internships and the value of those. So tell us a little bit why internships are so important, especially in today's job market.
Yeah, I think like we talked about earlier, figuring out if it's something you want to do or not. But B, getting that hands-on experience is so, so valuable. I don't think anyone can really even put into words how valuable it is as a student and as an employer. The other thing it hopefully creates is a pipeline for you to eventually get a job. And that's something that we talk about a lot with our employers, is we want this to be just as beneficial to you. And so if this opens the door where you're able to employ someone because they were such a good intern, perfect. And I think that's what people really need to understand, is what we're learning in the classroom is so valuable, but actually being able to apply it while you're still in school only better prepares you.
Yeah, for sure. And so kind of going off of that, how can students find internships and those opportunities that align with their goals while in their, in their majors while they're in school?
Handshake is a really, really great resource that we have. It is free to students. It's free to employers. You can get the app on your phone. You can log in from your desktop. So I'd say Handshake. The other thing is coming and talking with me. I am happy to dig into any information I can find, whether that's you saying, you know, I'm interested in working at a museum, whatever it might be. So us talking and figuring that out. Also, your professors are a great resource because a lot of time, especially if it's a niche field, they may have a connection that I don't have. They may have a contact already. And so I think looking at Handshake and searching for it there, but also coming and talking to someone that can help you figure those things out.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked about this a little bit, but can you elaborate just a little bit more, especially for like our freshmen and sophomores that feel like they don't have anything to put on a resume?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. I always tell people just list everything you've ever done. Like whenever you're writing a paper and you're doing one of those, whatever it's called when you're doing the outline of it, just list everything you've ever done. If you have dog walked, if you have babysat, if you worked at these different places, if you worked on your grandpa's farm, whatever it is, list every experience that you have because it's going to mean more than you realize. But even if it's not a job, okay, list a group project that you worked on that you're really proud of. List an accomplishment that you made that you're really proud of. List a scholarship that you got that you're really proud of. And so that's where I always start is just creating that outline for yourself because I do think we get really caught up a lot of the time. There's so many templates on Google. There's so many different versions of a resume that you can do. And there's so many people that are telling you so many different things about how to do one. And so I just always tell students, let's just start broad and we'll work it down from there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I want to kind of wrap up here a little bit with, tools or services / events because you host a lot of fun events on campus.
I try.
How can students take advantage of those, or what tools and events should they seek out?
Yeah, everything. We do a lot of different events. Like you said, we just did Resume Cafe yesterday. And so what that was just a relaxed setting for you to come to me and either we create your resume or we make edits to your resume and you get a free coffee. And then last month we did a coffee and career chats, I think is what we called it. And that was just a place for you to literally just to come talk to us and tell us, this is what I'm planning on doing. And then if you had questions about how do I go about doing this, that's what we were there to answer. And again, we always have snacks and free drinks and everything like that. But I think resources like that, like those events are very useful, but also just sending an email, coming and knocking on my door. I do have a little kind of strange hours because of, I work at USAO part of the time and here part of the time. But I'm so, so excited to always meet with a student when I can. And so I think the first step is honestly just showing up and making that connection.
Yeah, and your hours are for our students.
Yeah, I am here Wednesdays and Thursdays and every other Friday.
Perfect. Awesome. And you have a new office.
I do have a new office.
We moved.
Yes,
and
we did move.
Sydney is located in Ray Porter, right beside the business office. Yes. We'll get some signage. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, there will be some signage in the hallway so students can navigate and find her. But if you're not sure where she's at, just ask somebody. Run into admissions. They'll bring you down and she'll be happy to talk with you guys. Okay, so finally, my last main question. If a student's feeling lost or overwhelmed about their future, what's something that you want them to know?
Everyone does. Everyone feels lost and overwhelmed about something, and it's usually about our future. And I think at 18, everything feels really, really heavy. At 19, at 20, everything feels really, really heavy. And so one of the best pieces of advice I can give to anyone is you're not alone in that. Sometimes I'll tell people jokingly, but also not jokingly, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
I always say that.
Because you grow and you change and your life changes. And so I think that's what I want people to know is you're not the only person who's ever felt this way.
For sure. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Sydney.
Yeah,
I think that this has been very informative. I hope that our listeners get a lot out of this and it makes them feel more confident. And I hope that they're more aware of the support and the tools that you offer our students. So if you guys have any questions, you want help from Sydney, come and see her, shoot her an email because we know we have a lot of students that are off campus or totally online. And so you are also happy to help our students that are not here physically just by shooting an email back and forth, maybe a phone call or a Zoom. So please take advantage of Sydney. She's amazing. We love her.
Oh, thank you.
And this has been awesome. So anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I just really hope students know that this service exists to help them and that it is here on campus and that all I want to do, all I am here to do is help them in whatever way I can.
Awesome. That's great. All right. Thanks, Sydney.
Thanks,
Well,
Macey.
thank you guys for listening. We hope to see you next time on the Redlands Rundown. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes, and we will see you next time. Bye.